Hi, I'm going to speak about the global water crisis that's happening in the world today. According to water.org, the global water crisis is the number one biggest impact crisis that is happening to society right now. So what did that mean? As I learned about that main idea, it became clear to me that what that means is that we need to figure out what this is and how to fix it. As I learned about this, it became clear that there are two parts of this water crisis. The first part is having a lack of quality water. Most of society today in third world countries don't have good access to clean water. The second part is having a lack of water resource in general, and that's something that many developed countries are starting to run into now. So this is a twofold problem where we need to figure out how to give clean water to people and also how to preserve our water and protect it for those who do have access to clean water. So according to the World Health Organization, 1.8 billion people use contaminated water sources as their primary source of water daily. What this means is infections, disease, and problems that quite frankly, are the number one reason why people have health issues. So one of the things about this is I've lived in a third world country. I lived in the Amazon jungle for 2 years, and much of that time I spent in rural areas in very third world country type experiences, and water was one of the hardest things that we could get cleanly. We really had two options, and this is the case in most of these areas. One was, if you were lucky, you had a clean water source that maybe was a well or a spring, and the second option that most people use in areas like this is to have water delivered to them. Now, having water delivered is very prohibitive in these kind of areas because people can't afford that. When I lived in Brazil, it was cheaper to buy 2 liters of soda than it was to buy 2 liters of water. That was because water was a rare resource. So what people would do is most of the time they would end up go to a community well or a community spring, and I use that often as well, and well, I got sick from it as well. So that is a big issue. According to essentialneeds.org, 1 in 10 people lack access to safe water worldwide. So that is the one area that we need to work on first. There are a lot of resources being done to help do this. Again, according to the World Health Organization, there is from 2010 to 2012, so over 2 years, they increased funding for quality water sources to these countries by over 30% to over $2.9 billion annually. This is a great resource where we can start using this money to help these communities get access to clean water. And the other issue that we have is with having a lack of water resources, period. I think a great example of this is in California. Right now they have reservoirs drying up. They're taking water from neighboring states and other areas because they're in a serious lack of resources. In an article by Parks from 1999, he stated that since 1970 until 1999, California's growth increased by over 75% in population, and the impact that had on the water resource was even a larger percentage. And so what that means is that there's less water and more people who need it. And so they're really creating a burden to the water supply, especially the local water supply, where it's just drying up. And what that also has accumulated more problems with that. So now we have global warming that we know is happening now. And because of the global warming, we have warmer temperatures. A 5-degree increase in temperature worldwide creates less snowfall, which creates less water for our systems around us. It creates longer fire seasons, and it also creates drought, our reservoirs don't fill, and we end up compounding those problems. So that becomes a bigger issue as it continues. It just builds on itself. We need to learn how to conserve our water. There are conservation efforts within our own communities and within our own areas, especially right here in Wyoming, to conserve our water. We have our reservoirs, and there are groups that continue to monitor the reservoir levels to make sure that there's enough to go from year to year. And they work very closely together. There's been better and more efficient efforts, especially with neighboring states, to make that happen appropriately. One of the other issues that we end up with now in the United States and other developed countries is as we upgrade our infrastructures, we end up creating unhealthy conditions because those situations create different effects to our old infrastructure, trying to upgrade to our newer stuff. A great example of this, which has been a really big worldwide news point lately, is with Flint, Michigan. What happened there is they switched their water source from Lake Huron, which was a treated water from the lake. It went to a treatment plant. It was treated. It went out. The water was very clean, non-corrosive, and it didn't have any issues. Well, what they ended up doing was part of their upgrade, or as they thought was an upgrade, they ended up switching to water in the Flint River. It was cleaner water, so they didn't treat it, but that meant it was a little more corrosive. Because of that corrosiveness, they ended up eating away their pipes, and because that was an old infrastructure, those pipes had lead in them, and it created an increase in lead content in the children, especially in schools, which became a major issue. So as we increase and upgrade our infrastructures, we need to be very aware of how that might affect some of the things we've already done and how that can be a negative impact. So we need to be very aware of that as we continue to make ourselves, as we try to improve, we have to make sure we're not hurting ourselves in that process too. So that is what I've learned about water conservation and the water crisis going on right now. It affects not just Africa and third world countries and South America, but it affects all of us. There is a need in every situation that we're in to make sure that we continue to be aware of our water needs and take care of those water needs appropriately. I hope this works out, and I guess that's all I have. Thanks.